All right, does anybody want to read that for it? Or maybe we can just do that in chunks. It's kind of a reasonable sized chapter, so maybe like 5 verses each to just kind of work our way around. So 2 Kings chapter 3, and we're going to continue our studies in the life of King Jehoshaphat. So
you said 5 verses apiece?
Yeah.
Okay. That's cool. Now Jehoram, the son of Ahab, began to reign over Israel and Samaria in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, and reigned 12 years. And he wrought evil in the sight of the Lord, but not like his father and his mother, for he put away the image of Baal that his father had made. Nevertheless, he cleaved unto the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which made Israel to sin. He departed not therefrom. And Mesha, king of Moab, was a sheep master, and rendered unto the king of Israel 100,000 lambs, and 100,000 rams with wool. But it came to pass, when Ahab was dead, that the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel.
King Jehoram went out of Samaria at the same time, and numbered all Israel. And he went and sent to Jehoshaphat the king of Judah, saying, The king of Moab hath rebelled against me. Wilt thou go with me against Moab to battle? And he said, I will go up. I am as thou art, my people as thy people, and my horses as thy horses. And he said, Which way shall we go up? And he answered, The way through the wilderness of Edom. So the king of Israel went, and the king of Judah and the king of Edom, and they fetched a compass of 7 days' journey, and there was no water for the host and for the cattle that followed them. And the king of Israel said, Alas, the Lord hath called these 3 kings together to deliver them into the hand of Moab.
But Jehoshaphat asked, Is there no prophet of the Lord here through whom we may inquire of the Lord? An officer of the king of Israel answered, Elisha, son of Shaphat, is here. He used to pour water on the hands of Elijah. Jehoshaphat said, The word of the Lord is with him. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to him. Elisha said to the king of Israel, Why do you want to involve me? Go to the prophets of your father and the prophets of your mother. No, the king of Israel answered, because it was the Lord who called us 3 kings together to deliver us into the hands of Moab. Elijah said, As surely as the Lord Almighty lives, whom I serve, if I do not have respect for the presence of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, I would not pay any attention to you. But now bring me a harpist. While the harpist was playing, the hand of the Lord came to Elisha.
And he said, This is what the Lord says, Dig ditch after ditch in this wadi, for the Lord says, You will not see wind or rain, but the wadi will be filled with water, and you will drink, you and your cattle and your animals. This is easy in the Lord's sight. It will also hand Moab over to you. Then you must attack every fortified city and every choice city. You must cut down every good tree and stop up every spring of water. You must ruin every good piece of land with stones. About that time, for the grain offering the next morning, water suddenly came from the direction of Edom and filled the land.
And when all the Moabites heard that the kings were come up to fight against them, they gathered all who were able to put on armor and upward and stood in the border. And they rose up early in the morning, and the sun shone upon the water, and the Moabites saw the water on the other side as red as blood. And they said, This is blood, the kings are surely slain, and they have smitten one another. Now therefore Moab to the spoil. And when they came to the camp of Israel, the Israelites rose up and smote the Moabites, so that they fled before them. But they went forward, smiting the Moabites even in their country. And they beat down the cities, and on every good piece of land cast every man his stone, and filled it. And they stopped up all the wells of water, and they felled all the good trees. Only in Kir-Haresh left they its stones. Howbeit the slingers went about it and smote it. And when the king of Moab saw that the battle was too severe for him, he took with him 700 men and drew swords to break through even unto the king of Edom, but they could not. Then he took his eldest son and should have reigned in his stead, and offered him for a burnt offering upon the wall. And there was great indignation against Israel, and they departed from him and returned to their own land.
Thank you for reading that. So just to bring us up to speed a little bit with King Jehoshaphat, we've been studying his life, and what we've been seeing when we look at this guy's life is when he's in Judah, he's a very godly king. He does all the right things. We've read about how as a king he worked to bring the people back to the Lord. He puts teachers in all these different cities in Judah. He fortified the cities. He builds up this strong military. Last week we looked at how he made all these judicial reforms. He made sure that there were these competent, honest judges living in the cities that were able to provide judgment and some structure to the people. And we read about how God really blessed him. There were people bringing him tribute, things like this. So he actually, from a perspective of what he's doing within Judah, is a very godly king. But he seems to get himself into trouble when he starts to intermix with the northern kingdom. Because with the northern kingdom, we know that Ahab was king when he started, and Ahab and Jezebel were just known for their wickedness. They worshiped these false gods, and they persecuted God's prophets. And he decides to enter into an alliance with this guy, and his son, who will become king after him, marries the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel. And her name is Athaliah. She'll eventually become the queen of the southern kingdom of Judah. But anyway, it creates a whole lot of problems. Anyway, he does a good job, but he ends up having problems when he makes these alliances with this northern kingdom of Israel. And he actually got rebuked. What we looked at last week is he came back home from this battle with Ahab. He was helping Ahab, and he gets rebuked because of his ties to the northern kingdom. And the Lord's like, why do you help those who hate the Lord? It's like he gets criticized for this. And so here we are again. We're going to see him once again building an alliance with a king of the north. And in many ways, when you get into a marriage alliance, it's for life. It's not something that you can easily break from a political perspective. Based on what I've read about these alliances, like when you marry somebody's daughter into your family, and if you don't keep them happy, there's some real trouble. Brother Casey.
I'm wondering if it's fair to say that, because I was thinking, how can we apply the way, yes, what would Jesus have done? Well, he would have reached out to Israel. And so is it fair to say it's because Jehoshaphat reached out to Israel? Or is it because of the way he got drawn in? And in both cases here, it was Israel asking him, the king of Israel asking him, will you go to war with me as my ally? So he's making this evil nation's problems his problem somehow. And if maybe there's something to that, rather than just being allied with them, because we talked about that before. Was he allying with them to try to bring them back? But how he was allying with them, the cause was just wrong.
And that's a good point. I mean, this is something, and there's some classes that other brethren have done where they compare this king, Jehoshaphat, to Hezekiah. When Hezekiah is king, he actually has a revival of these feasts and stuff, and he goes and invites the northern kingdom to come down. And there's some people who actually do come down, and some of them that mock them, and then that, within a few years, Israel's gone, right? They kind of mock. But yeah, some people, they've used Hezekiah as like, here's what you should do. It kind of gets hijacked into some reunion stuff too. They try to show like you shouldn't just reunite. Anyway, but the point is they show that Hezekiah does a good thing. He like actually does try to build peace with them, but he says, come down and worship with us. We're welcoming you, we're opening our doors. Whereas Jehoshaphat, he doesn't, there's not like a spiritual first, it's just they join together and yeah, but I think, yeah, it's a good question. But he definitely gets in trouble the way he does it from the Lord, and that's kind of where we are today. And if you just think about the last time he's interacting with Israel, what happens is King Ahab and himself, they go into battle with Syria, and Ahab gets killed, right? Ahab, they set up this agreement where Ahab is going to dress as a normal soldier, and Jehoshaphat's going to dress as the king. And so what happens is the army goes after him, and Jehoshaphat gets scared and he cries out, and then they leave off following him, and they end up killing the king of Israel by luck, by chance. He gets hit by an arrow and he dies. Now we know it's not by chance. This is what God wanted to have happen, but it looks like it's by chance. And so what happens is he's dead now. So Ahab has died, and we're kind of, from a time frame where we skipped over, we're going to come back eventually, but he has a son named Ahaziah that actually reigns for 2 years. And we haven't touched on him. I'm just following the Second Chronicles chronology, and they put that at the end of Jehoshaphat's reign, but it actually happened before what we're reading about today. But he has a son named Ahaziah, and he only lives for 2 years. He's the one who falls through the lattice, and but he dies, and then his brother, which is Jehoram, what we're looking at today, he's now king. But in the meantime, what happens is Moab says, well, look, the king of Israel, Ahab, is dead. He just got whipped in battle. I'm not giving this guy tribute anymore, and he stops giving him tribute. And I have a map here, and I don't know if it's accurate to this exact time period, but this gives a general idea of where these kingdoms are, because really there's 4 kings at play in this passage. So you have the king of Israel, which is Jehoram, and it talks about Moab, which is across the Jordan, rebels against them. They were giving them tribute year after year, and then he decides, I'm not going to do that anymore. And that happens right after his father dies. That's actually we don't have to look at it right now, but it's in 2 Kings chapter 1, verse 1. After Ahab dies, there's a quick little passage about how Moab stops sending tribute. And which makes sense, right? You're being dominated by this other country. Their strong leader gets killed in battle. I'm not giving them tribute anymore. They're weak, right? So he stops sending them this, it talks about these lambs and the wool, and he doesn't do that anymore. And so you have the king of Israel, and then Moab at the time was under their control, but now they've broken free. And so Israel goes down to the king of Judah, which is Jehoshaphat, and asks him for his help. And once again, Jehoshaphat is saying, sure. And the king of Edom is here too. What you'll find out later on in this is when they all go to Elijah, it mentions that Elisha, sorry, I should make sure to, 2 different guys, Elisha, when they go to Elisha, they bring with them these 3 kings. It's the king of Israel, the king of Judah, and the king of Edom. Now there's another place where it actually tells us that Edom doesn't actually have a king, they have like a governor, because Edom is under the jurisdiction of Judah at this time. So Israel, and it goes back to the days of David. If you think about when David was king, he kind of put a lot of these guys under his subjugation. I don't know if that's the right word, but he subjects a lot of these surrounding nations, including Moab and Edom, and it seems at this time in history that they're still under the control. But now you have a divided kingdom, and it's like Moab is held by the northern kingdom of Israel, and Edom is held by the kingdom of Judah. And so that's where we are today. These are just giving you a visual of what happens. And I don't know anything about the terrain of the land, but when I look at the map, to me it looks like the most direct route is just to cross over the Jordan and attack the king of Moab. But that's not what Israel wants to do. If you're reading here, he asks them to go with him, and in verse 6 he says, by what way shall we march? And he says, by the way of the wilderness of Edom. So what they're going to do, and I think the verse even uses the expression, in verse 9, mine says a circuitous march. I think somebody else has said they make a compass. The King James says something like that. But it gives you the idea, instead of going directly to Moab, it's like they're kind of swinging around, and it's like they want to take them by surprise almost. They're going to go down into this area of Edom, and my understanding of where the kingdom of Edom is a pretty deserty land. And that kind of sets the stage, I think, for what happens is for whatever reason, they expect to find water there, there's not. And that's kind of what sets up the stage for what's happening today. And just talking a little bit about not Ahaziah. Ahaziah is the guy who reigned for 2 years, and then now his brother Jehoram is in power. And it tells us that Jehoram he's not a good king, but it makes a comment of saying he's not as bad as the guys who came before him. And in verse 2, it actually says he puts away the pillar of Baal that his father had made. And so perhaps this is part of the influence that Jehoshaphat has, is that, okay, maybe he's seeing some potential changes taking place with this guy, and maybe he's getting a little bit overly hopeful. So in any case, they join forces together, and they start to go to war with him. And it says that they make this circuitous route, and they go through the kingdom of Edom. So I know when I originally read this passage, it's like I was a little confused. How are they getting lost? But I think what's happening is Israel's come all the way down. The kingdom of Judah's gone all the way down, and they're trying to make a circuitous, I may not be pronouncing it right, a compass is what one version says. He makes this roundabout attack, and it's like they almost want to catch him by surprise. And they want to come up from the south against the kingdom of Moab instead of coming from the north, which to me looks more direct, but I think they're trying to do a surprise attack. And in the midst of this, what happens is they start wandering, and it tells us that they marched for 7 days. There was no water for the army or the animals that followed them. So I'm not an expert on battle in the ancient Near East, but I know enough to know that if you don't have any water, you're in a lot of trouble. So it's not really clear what happens exactly, but they decide to march around. It's almost like they're trying to sneak up on them, and they get themselves in this really bad situation. And what happens is they're sitting out here with these 3 kings and their armies. There's no water. And that's some pretty bad news. And they realize what a bad situation they're in. And one of the things that's kind of interesting here when you read about this is just these different reactions from these 2 kings. And with Jehoshaphat, we know he's a mostly godly man. Not so much Jehoram. He's not as godly. And just look at their reaction. Verse 10, the king of Israel says, "Alas." That's what my version says. I don't know if anyone's version says something else, but it's like this sort of desperate plea. "Alas, the Lord has called us out, these 3 kings, to give them into the hand of Moab." So that's how he looks at it. Jehoshaphat says, is there no prophet of the Lord here through whom we may inquire of the Lord? And I think this is a really important little section here, because you have these 2 guys, and they get into a very bad situation, and they both react in 2 completely different ways. The northern kingdom, who's not very spiritual, his first reaction is, "We're doomed. God has brought us out here." And again, I don't know other people's versions, but mine says he uses the word "alas," like he's sort of desperate. He just doesn't have this faith. He just sees the gloom in things. But the king of Jehoshaphat, his godly example is that he says, "Let's inquire of the Lord." So before he panics and sees everything is bad, his first reaction is to inquire of the Lord. I think that's a very important thing to take away here, is that there's just the example of a faithful response to a very difficult situation, and the response of a more faithless response to this very difficult situation. And this is a lot. They're really in a lot of trouble here. You're out in the middle of a desert without any water for your armies. You're gonna have issues really quick. And so it's understandable why the king of Israel is despondent. So I think, again, this is a good reflection on Jehoshaphat, that this is his first response to things. And just kind of thinking about this for a second is just, I was just trying to think of examples in Scripture where you see people who are put in a bad situation like this, and you see like a godly response, and you see a not so godly response. And if you want to keep a finger here, but turn with me to 2 Kings chapter 6. Near this time frame.
Can I make a comment real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
This kind of calls to mind the verse where it says, we must believe that God is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. And we kind of get the different approaches there. Like you're saying, there's the first one who is there's no hope, that's a bad example of faith. And the other one saying, we need to petition God, believing there is a hope of salvation, deliverance. And then the servant says, here's the avenue that we can go to have that approach then.
Good passage.
Sorry, where are we turning to now?
Oh, 2 Kings chapter 6. I just want to look at verses 15 and 17 really quick. And in this narrative, we are also with Elisha, who we're with here, and he's with his servant. And this is where the king of Israel sends these armies out to him. And so how do they respond? 2 Kings chapter 6, verses 15 to 17, if you don't mind reading that.
And when the servant of the man of God arose early and went out, there was an army surrounding the city with horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, Alas, my master, what shall we do? So he answered, Do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. Then the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha.
So, sort of a similar incident there, in which in both of these, I personally would probably be very afraid. I don't know if I'd have the same the faith of Elisha and the faith of Jehoshaphat, but similar situation, Elisha and his servant he uses that same word, alas. You know, it's understandably very scary. You've got an army at your doorstep. And what he does is he opens his eyes, and what he can see is that even though humanly speaking, it looks like they're in a very desperate situation, he knows that those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And this allows him to see that the Lord, outside of the scope of human sight, his angels are at work in our lives, and that even as desperate as things may look, the Lord is there. And so this is something that Elisha understood as well. And you even see in this passage that Elisha kind of recognizes Jehoshaphat's godliness. When they go to ask him for help, he kind of mocks the king of Israel. If you look at verse 11, Jehoshaphat said, Is there no prophet of the Lord? Oh, wait, no, that's Jehoshaphat, sorry. Verse 13, then Elisha said to the king of Israel, What have I to do with you? Go to the prophets of your mother and the prophets of your father. And he kind of like ridicules this guy. It's like, you don't have any interest in the Lord and you're coming when you need trouble. But then he makes a comment that, as the Lord lives, before whom I stand, were it not that I have regard for Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, I would neither look at you nor see you. And so I think this tells us a little bit about, you have Elisha, this godly prophet. How does he, summarize these two guys? And the king of Israel is like, I wouldn't even talk to you if Jehoshaphat wasn't here with you right now. I think that just shows the gap in their spiritual differences. Yeah.
I think it's curious. How did Elisha happen to be nearby when they're going to battle? Did somebody go get him, or how did that work? It doesn't say, but it's a curious fact.
Yeah, and that's actually an interesting point. There's some people that wonder that same thing. How is Elisha on hand? Some people make the comment that, when Elisha interacted with Ahab and his family, it was never good, right? It was kind of a dangerous situation. So they think maybe he's kind of gone out to a wilderness area away from everything. That's just speculation, but perhaps he's out there out of fear and somebody knows about his location. And we kind of talked about this a few weeks ago when we were talking about Jehoshaphat. And again, he does the right thing here. He wants to inquire of the Lord, but we think about the timing. And we kind of mentioned this a few weeks ago, it's when he's deciding to inquire of the Lord. We don't read in this passage. Again, not everything's recorded for us. It's just like a very summarized version. But does Jehoshaphat inquire of the Lord before he decides to join this guy and go to battle with him? We don't hear that. But, when David was king, it was always, before David did anything, it's like, he inquired of the Lord, shall I go up against these guys? Shall I stay? Or shall, you know what I mean? And this is David's style. But Jehoshaphat, it feels like it's the timing. It's like he decides to inquire of the Lord, but he doesn't decide to do that until he's in this bad situation. And the other point, and somebody had made this point a couple weeks ago when we were studying this, and I had not thought of that, but when Jehoshaphat went up to help Ahab in war, he didn't bring any prophets with him. He asked the king of Israel, do you have any prophets here we can inquire of? Once again, he's turning to Israel and asking, do you have any prophets we may inquire of? And we know that there's prophets in Judah because he gets rebuked by a prophet whose name is Jehu, not to be confused with the future King Jehu, but his name is Jehu, the son of Hanani. So there's definitely prophets that he could have brought with him. So maybe, there's some good in Jehoshaphat. Maybe there's just, it's flawed, some of his decision making. All right, so next here's Elisha. They go before him. At first he's like, I'm not going to talk to the king of Israel, but you have Judah with this King Jehoshaphat. I respect him. I'll talk to you. And what he does is he asks them to play a musical instrument. And this is kind of an interesting concept. It's like he's going to give this prophecy, but he needs to listen to this music first. And it's just kind of interesting how God works in different ways in different places. And here, before he's going to give a prophecy, he says, play a musical instrument. So kind of an interesting little note there. And, I just kind of think of places in the Bible where music and God's power at work interact. I don't know if anybody can think of any other, Brother Joseph? Sons of Asaph, yep. Yeah.
Yeah, there was one that Moses was given by God, and he says, I want you to teach the Israelites to sing this song, and it's about their rebellion and what they did. The other thing that always struck me, I was reading this morning, was the little bitty song that happened in the Kings when the women gather their tambourines, and they're basically like, Saul's killed his thousands, David has killed his tens of thousands. That little stanza causes the rift between David and Saul for the rest of their lives. Just because some women gathered a tambourine and sang that song. It was on the top 40. Like, unbelievable. And they literally, it says in that passage, it says, and Saul was at enmity with David for the rest of his life because of that one song. So it's pretty unbelievable how these things happen. And then Deborah's song after the defeat, and then you've got Miriam's song after they crossed the Red Sea, that are all pretty spectacular.
Thank you for those examples. And Asaph, I think that's another good one as well. It's this music and prophecy and serving God. I was thinking about, too, like in Joshua, the Battle of Jericho. What do they do before they attack? They're blowing their trumpets, they're marching around the city, and it's sort of similar to what happens here, because what does Elisha tell them to do? Make ditches, trenches. Well, there's different versions worded a little bit differently, but you're in the desert area. It's like, go out and build these trenches and these ditches, and however you want to phrase it. And it kind of reminds me a little bit like the Battle of Jericho. It's like, this seems odd. We're going to march around the city. But by faith, they actually do what they're supposed to do. But I do think it shows a little bit, too, of the kind of power and authority that God gives his prophets. If you want to keep a finger here and just turn to Jeremiah chapter 1 and verse 10, and this is where God is calling Jeremiah, and he's going to tell him the kind of authority he's going to give him. Jeremiah 1, and I have 1 verse 10. If someone actually could read 9 and 10.
See, I have appointed you this day over the nations and over the kingdoms to pluck up, to break down, to destroy, and to overthrow, to build and to plant, the almond rod, the boiling pot.
Thank you for reading that. But here's Jeremiah being called, and he says, I have set you this day over nations. And this is the kind of power that these prophets have, is like, you've got these 3 kings standing at the feet of Elisha. And he gives them this arguably strange instruction. It's not like, here's the battle strategy you should use. Here's how you guys should change. Here's where you're going to find water. It's like, I want you to go out and dig trenches and dig these pits. And that's what they're given. So it just kind of shows the kind of power and authority that God gives to his prophets. Yeah.
As many as she could find, she brought them, and they filled all the vessels from that one pot of oil.
That's a good point, yeah. And, to the credit of the people, that lady he told, that takes some faith to listen to that, right? I mean, it's, we talk about these kings aren't exactly always the strongest examples, but they did what he said. And God ends up giving them victory. And what ends up happening is that Moab comes out, and he looks out there and he sees what he thinks is a sea of blood. And so in his mind, he's like, okay, these kings came out to get me, but they end up fighting with each other, and they're all dead. And so he thinks he's going to go and gather this plunder. But what happens instead is that the very opposite happens. They rose early in the morning, and sun shone on the water. The Moabites saw the water opposite them as red as blood. And so he thinks this is the blood of all these kings and their soldiers that have come out to fight against them. And so he goes out to get the spoil. But when they came to the camp of Israel, the Israelites rose and struck the Moabites until they fled before them. And they were given directions to really just destroy this guy's land. When you put, let me find that passage again. They overthrew the cities, every good piece of land. They threw a stone until it was covered. They stopped every spring. They fell all the good trees. I mean, they really punished this guy. They punished this guy for the things that he does. And then it's kind of the end is where there's a lot of questions. And this is one of these kind of enigmatic passages in the Bible where you're kind of left scratching your head. And I honestly don't have the answer to this, but at the end, the king of Moab is kind of on his last limb. He realizes he's about to be defeated. And he says he took his oldest son, who was to reign in his place, and he offered him for a burnt offering on the wall. There came a great wrath against Israel, and they withdrew from him and returned to their own land. And so there's a lot of questions here. What in the world is happening? So we can kind of understand. Excuse me. You kind of understand why a pagan king might do something like this, but it seems like it works. Brother Joseph.
I was just curious. I've never understood this passage. Can you shed any light on why in the world he would sacrifice his own son on the wall? Was it to a god? Was it just so people would realize what was going on? So can you back up and explain that a little bit?
So you're not alone, because when you go out and you read commentaries, when you read things even within our community, within the mainstream Christian community, most people are left scratching their head exactly what's happening, because it's not clear. So the thing about, I was going to talk about this as well, but they actually found what's known as the Mesha stele, which is attributed to this king here. His name is Mesha, and he gives his perspective on things that happen. This was discovered back in the 1800s in modern day. I think it would be like Jordan, right? That's where Edom was, right? Anyway, they find this Mesha stele, and he gives his perspective. Of course, his perspective is from his gods. So his gods were angry with him. The Israelites took him over, But it doesn't mention this event, and so there's some different. But he worships Chemosh. He doesn't worship the God of Israel. Maybe, is it Chemosh? Is that how it's pronounced? I may be mispronouncing it. But it says foreign god, so it's not like he's doing this for Israel. And so there's a question about who this great wrath is coming out from. So this is our late brother Wes Booker. I got this off of the Bible reading site, but this is his perspective. I'll just give a couple different views on this. And he even comes in, and this is one where I either respect somebody or don't. I just can't stand when people look at a difficult passage like this and this is the answer. I like how Brother Wes starts off with, this is a maybe of an answer. It looks like the ones who end up returning to their own land are the armies of Israel, Judah, and Edom, and the ones who are in great anger are the Moabites. Now, the reason for this great anger is their way of looking at the whole situation, was that their king was forced into sacrificing his own son, an heir to the throne, by the actions of Israel, Judah, and Edom. Of course, we know that human sacrifice was something God forbade under his law, but for the nations steeped in idolatry, this may have been a common practice. But the horror of the king feeling the need to resort to such a thing, and to add to it, being his firstborn son, that was what really upset the Moabites. But we are left with the puzzling actions of Israel, Judah, and Edom. What was it about the king of Moab's sinful actions that prompted them into leaving when they had been successful in the campaign up until this point? I don't really have an answer for this one. If you have any ideas, let me know. I put that on the Bible board. But anyway, so other people kind of struggle with this too. But one thought is that when the Moabites see this, they get really angry, and it kind of revives them in battle, and that's where this great wrath came against Israel, from the Moabites. Like, you forced our king to kill his own son, and they get kind of rallied.
Okay, so just refresh my memory, who's allied with who again? So it's Israel and Judah,
Israel, Judah, and Edom
Edom,
are,
which is,
at this point, you will see this changes towards the end of Jehoshaphat's reign, but those three are together, and then
At the start
Moab
of it.
is on the other side.
so it's just Moab.
Just Moab right now.
Because usually they fight with Ammon, that's why I was curious. So you think, well, this guy who's a commentator thinks he did it to rally his own troops by killing his heir to the throne?
He probably was doing it for his God, but the impact was that his own people saw this, and they get really angry, and they get riled up, and they decide, it kind of gives them some vengeance.
Because they did do that in the worship of Molech and Chemosh. They offer their children in the fire.
Yeah. And that's what, I looked at several. I looked at like Matthew Henry, his like free commentator. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it seems pretty clear that, to me, that the king of Moab sees this as his absolute last-ditch option to give the most important thing in his life to his God, in hopes that maybe somehow his God will turn this battle around for him. And it was so horrible that it's like, until that point, the Moabites saw this as an honorable battle, perhaps. But for Israel to force this on their king, that went too far. Sort of like Germany and the Versailles Treaty, too far. And it created all sorts of problems. Well, Israel didn't force it. They saw it that way, though. Israel was just winning the battle, and the king decided, this is what I'm going to have to do to turn the tide.
So here's another, I was going to give another perspective on this too. This is from the website gotquestions.org, which is an evangelical website. But anyway, I was just curious what they thought. And the writer says, knowing that human sacrifice was an abomination, the army of Israel could also have been indignant with themselves for having pushed things to the point of an atrocity. The same holds true for Judah and Edom, who were likely sickened at the sight of human sacrifice, especially when the battle had essentially been over for a while. In any case, the siege of King Jehoshaphat was relinquished, and the allies withdrew from battle. So there's kind of two different, one is that the indignation came from the Moabites, the other is that the people of Israel saw this, and they were indignant, and they're like just disgusted, and so that kind of ended the battle. But there's a lot of questions about it. It's just one of those passages where people are just not sure.
It's kind of weird, though, because Israel wind up worshiping both Molech and Chemosh later on, and it was during the times of King Hezekiah that God criticized them so much for offering their children to Molech and Chemosh, and says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw your bodies into the valley of Hinnom, where you've been worshiping Chemosh and Molech and offering your children that I didn't ask you to do. And that became Gehenna, which is the reference Christ uses in the New Testament, where the fire does not go out and where the worm dieth not. So God is the only one who seems to express contempt for this practice, because the Jews picked it right up. I doubt they were upset or astonished by it, because it had been done all through time. Every nation around them had done human sacrifice. That's why I think it's kind of funny when you look at the New World. They were disgusted by the practices of the Olmecs and the Incas and the Aztecs, because they had human sacrifice all the time. And I'm like, this is what every pagan nation does. It always leads to this, as the debasement of humanity. So I don't know. That's really cool about the Misha Steele, though. Thanks.
Yeah, it's an interesting read, and there's some things in there. It mentions Omri, who would be the grandfather of King Jehoram. There's some debate that it mentions David. There's a lot of scholars are like, well, it's not saying David, anyway, which would be important, because there's some questions about David's historicity. How do you say that word? Whether David was a real historical figure. There's debate. And so this is a place where he's kind of mentioned, possibly. It mentions Yahweh's name. It's in one place I read, this is the first place where Yahweh's name is mentioned outside the Bible by someone concurrent with the scripture times. So it's kind of an interesting, I'd never heard of this before until I did this, was reading up on this stuff, and I thought it was really interesting. It was in the late 1800s, and this is back when the Ottoman Empire was in control, and I believe it was the Germans that were involved in it somehow, because at the time they were big, and they had all these universities, and and it actually gets broken by somebody out of anger because they have to give it to these Europeans. And it's kind of an interesting story. That's why it's all cracked like that, is it was, they discovered it, and I think somebody got mad that they had to give it to these Europeans, some local people, so they broke it. So it's kind of an interesting story, But anyway, this kind of is another episode in the life of Jehoshaphat. Again, there's points where it's like he seems like he's doing some really faithful things, but then there's maybe some little bit of a questionable questions of whether he's really preparing ahead of time like he should be. So, all right, and so God willing, next week, go back, and next week I actually won't be here. I'll be on vacation, so Perry's going to find a replacement. But the next time I'm on, I'm hoping to look at this 2 Chronicles 20, where God will deliver Judah. This time is under attack, and